their third walk-off win of the year after blocking Chicago's field goal as time expired yesterday to improve to 7-3 on the season. They will soon turn their focus to a visit from the 49ers coming up on Sunday. San Francisco 5-5, desperate for a win to keep their division and playoff hopes in sight. Kick on Sunday is at 3:25.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, it's game day for the Bucks. They are at Fiserv Forum tonight to face Houston. Rockets come in 10-4 in the air. Milwaukee 4-9. Tip is at 7. And Wisconsin going to take on UT Rio Grande Valley tonight. Tip is also at 7. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, Print.
Why does it matter? Right? I mean, the offense will, be run, and those guys will do a lot of things collaboratively together. And I don't think it really is important as to who's calling you.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
That's a soundbite of the week. I can't get that soundbite out of my head. And for about the last 10 minutes getting ready for the show, I was listening to Zach and Jesse on The Camp, the episode they put out earlier today, basically talking about whether or not we're overreacting to that press conference. And I haven't listened to more than a couple minutes yet, so I'm always going to defer to those two guys. We'll have Jesse on tomorrow night at 5:30, so we'll get his, by tomorrow night, very, very measured, perspective-filled take. I think you talk to Jesse or Zach. I mean, we talked to Zach on Bill's show yesterday, a half hour after Luke Fickell's presser, and Zach was kind of like, I don't really know what all that was. We didn't know what to make of it. By tomorrow night, I'm really excited to talk to Jesse. Not that Jesse's one to overreact or be sensationalist. He's probably the least likely of anyone you ever hear on this network to be sensationalist. So we'll talk with him tomorrow, and I'm interested to listen to more of Zach and Jesse on The Camp on my drive home tonight. I can't get that soundbite out of my head. That's a soundbite of the week. I can't imagine anything else will knock that off over the next couple of nights, so I had to stick it into the intro. I get what Luke Fickell's saying. I would have said it differently. I would have said, you know what? We got a couple guys who I think are great options to call plays. We might give them all a shot to do it, to get them some experience and to get some different looks. But, really, it's going to be the entire staff working together on this thing over the next 2 weeks. There you go. That's a great answer. Communicate the same message. You accomplish the same communicative goal without saying, well, what does it matter? Well, brother, you just fired the guy who was calling plays. And now here we are at a press conference talking about it. It's got to matter on some level. Maybe we'll talk Badgers football tonight. We certainly don't have to if that's not what's on your mind. I think that's the soundbite of the week, so I put it in the intro. It's the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Thank you for being here. Mike Clemens coming out about an hour and a half to get the latest of what's going on in Green Bay after their win over the Bears on Sunday. So excited to connect with Mike as we do most Tuesdays and Thursdays. Really, really lucky to have him contributing twice a week to the show. I also have a Bucks thought and a Badgers basketball thought because both of those two teams were in action last night. I can give you a little take on each of those games, and I want to take your takes as well. 608-321-1670, call and text, and you can find the live stream, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. You can comment on that. You know the drill, unless this is your first night watching, in which case, welcome. Thank you for watching or listening, but you know the drill. You know where you can consume the show and interact with the show. I was really struggling with what to watch last night. I felt my eyes wandering. I am a firm believer of all of the mantras or cliches or all the things that people say about life. Like, I am a firm believer in the idea that we always want what we can't have. Like, I believe in that more than I believe in most things, most people. And I felt that last night because I'm watching the Bucks for a couple minutes. I'm like, I'd rather watch the Badgers. And then I had the Badger game on. It's like, what am I doing? I should be watching Monday Night Football round and round and round. And I didn't really effectively watch any of the games. I watched the last 10 minutes of the Badger game unencumbered. I stayed on the Badger game. I followed the fourth quarter of the Bucks game on Twitter. Did not watch the end of the Bucks game. Just followed it. Caught up with what I needed to see on the internet. And then watched the last quarter and a half of Monday Night Football standalone. Now, by that point, the game was mostly over, but I think when I turned it on in the third quarter, after both basketball games had ended, it was a 10-point game. I wasn't expecting Dallas to mount a comeback. How could you expect Dallas to do anything well right now? But in a 10-point game, I got to keep my eyes and my television open to the possibility, so I watched the end of the game. The Cowboys are worse than a joke. And I want to start with Monday Night Football last night. The Cowboys, for years, Stephen A. and other television personalities, it's a good bit to make fun of the Cowboys. I think it's just sad now. All of it. What's going on the field is sad. What's going on off the field is sad in multiple ways. Like, Trey Lance isn't good enough to play over Cooper Rush, the guy you spent a fourth-round pick to get, the player that the Niners spent the third overall pick to get. You can't even at least put him out there in garbage time. That's how bad he is, right? They acquired Jonathan Mingo. I don't know if they expected him to help without Dak. I don't know what they expected. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they've been doing for the last year. And I know a lot of you, because of what happened in the 90s, are no fans of the Dallas Cowboys. I get that. And you're not going to shed any tears for him. But for the last 3 seasons under Mike McCarthy, that team was sturdy and rock solid. They would win 12 games a year. They would crush bad teams. They defend their home field. Now, they lost to better teams or hot teams in the case of the Packers last year. I also think the Packers were better in the playoffs last year. But a sturdy, streamlined, functioning outfit the last 3 years, on par with just about every team in the NFL, except for maybe the Niners, who were a little bit better. Maybe the Rams at times have been a little bit better, right? But the Dallas Cowboys have been right there. And it's actually sad, in my opinion, maybe not yours, but it's sad, in my opinion, to see what they've become. And it's mostly, if not exclusively, the fault of Jerry Jones' decision-making and process over the last 3 years. And to hear Stephen A. Smith on First Take earlier today calling out his mental competency and basically saying, yeah, this is what Joe Biden looked like. Like, who's going to step in and tell this guy he needs to stop? Which is, people have made fun of Jerry Jones forever. It's never reached that. So to hear that on First Take this morning with Stephen A. Smith was jarring. I think the story of last night is the Texans, not the Cowboys. The Cowboys stink, and they don't know what they're doing, and we've known that for months. The story is the Texans, and there's a Packer connection with the Texans. I'm left wanting when I watch the Houston Texans. I'm left underwhelmed. I'm left unsatisfied. It's not to say that they're not winning. They're winning. They're 7-4. They're comfortably in command of their division. Their division also stinks, but not like the sky is falling in Houston. I've just been left wanting. Their last couple of games, they lost to Detroit, which no shame in that, unless Jared Goff throws 5 picks and you're at home. Then maybe that's a game you should win. Maybe. It just seems like that's a game that you should probably be able to close the deal on. Lost to the Jets, who just fired their general manager today. That's how bad they've been. They already fired their coach, but today they fired their general manager. They beat Indy, but the game in which they beat Indy, the Colts, that was the game Anthony Richardson tapped out. Anthony Richardson was benched after that game. He was like 10 of 30 or something. He was horrible in that game. So again, I'm not taking away anything from these wins, but you look at the context of some of these games that they played in. Oh, and the week before Indy, they were in Green Bay and CJ Stroud threw for 86 yards and they lost to the Packers. Now, I think the Packers are a fine team, as we've talked about, but man, 86 yards. I'm just left wanting by the Texans. And I don't think it's unfair to say that they've been a relative disappointment. A relative disappointment. They haven't been a disappointment on the level of the New York Jets or the San Francisco 49ers, right? They've been a relative disappointment. They haven't been as good as many thought or many hoped. And if you think that's unfair, if you think I'm reaching, well, just watch CJ Stroud's body language. He looks frustrated at times. God, I can't miss that throw. God, we're still not connecting on that. God, there's something missing, okay? Relative disappointment. Not a huge, massive disaster disappointment, a relative disappointment from what we thought they maybe could be before the year. And maybe we expected too much of the Texans. Maybe we expected too much of the Packers. I think the Packers and the Texans are very much linked at the hip. They were before the year. People comparing CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, about to begin their second year as a starter. A lot of talent around them, very young, up and coming, young head coaches. DeMeco Ryans a little bit younger than Matt LaFleur, but still, right? A lot of similarities, AFC, NFC counterparts. A lot of people have connected these two teams. And I was interested to see this year if one team was going to take off and the other was going to disappoint. Because typically, There's a lot of teams that get a lot of preseason hype. Not all of them live up to the hype. See Jets, New York. I think the Packers and Texans have both still been quite good. They just haven't maybe been the elite Super Bowl level, juggernauts that many people thought they could turn into this offseason. I'm going to play you a sampling of audio cuts here. People talking about the Packers and the Texans. Now, the Texans didn't play until last night, so some of the comments about the Texans were from today. This, and I think I played this during last night's show, but if you missed it, this is Football Night in America, so Maria Taylor setting it up for Devin McCourty and Jason Garrett to talk about the Packers and the win over the Bears. Here's what they had to say.
The Packers, one thing they know how to do is beat the Bears. Their 11th straight victory over the Bears. Let's talk about the Lowe's team health and the Packers ceiling. I mean, what did we learn about them in this game and where they're going moving forward?
This is a good Packers team, but coming into the season, I thought they would be up there with Detroit fighting to win this NFC North. I don't see it. I think Jordan Love being at the top of the league in interceptions, not what you want. I don't see this Packers team really being a contender down the stretch.
I don't think they're in the same place that Detroit is, but I really like what they did today. Chicago played the game they wanted to play. They kept Jordan Love and that offense off the field, ball control. But in the big moment, they're down 19-14, 3 minutes to go. He drives them down the field. And Rich Bisaccia, their special teams coach, I got a text from him. He saw what Kansas City did last week. He said, I got something for you too. Blocking that kick, that can be the kind of thing that can get a team going. So I'm still a Packer fan. I think they got a lot of football left in them.
I sneaky kind of like Jason Garrett on the broadcast. He's folksy. He's fun. So that's Football Night in America. Here's Colin Cowherd. This is a snippet from his podcast with John Middlecoff talking about the Packers-Bears.
It is pretty clear. You watch Buffalo and Kansas City. You watch Detroit. I no longer classify San Francisco. We'll get to this in a minute or two. But I mean, there are three teams in this league that just are different. And I think Buffalo, Kansas City, and Detroit right now, they just look different than everybody else. Yeah. Baltimore can, but in big spots, they don't live up to it. But I think Green Bay feels like they're a year away. They're still young. I like Jordan Love a lot. He was 13-17, touchdown pick. Off a bye, he was okay. I think my take on Jordan Love, he's always been more Favre than Rodgers.
All right, so there Cowherd continues to talk on. We don't need to make this a Jordan Love thing. This is a Packers thing, Packers-Texans thing. Here's Cowherd's reaction to the Texans loss last night. Last soundbite that I have for you.
I think the Houston Texans are fine. They're the Green Bay Packers of the AFC. They're a year away. They need another draft. They're a little bit thin. The Packers are a little young. Texans are a little thin. They both have good young coaches, really good young quarterbacks. They're just not ready to beat the Detroits or like the Buffaloes and Kansas Cities, but it's a good team.
So just a couple comments relating to the Packers and the Texans. My point in playing those back-to-back-to-back, you're hearing some of the same talking points of the Packers and of the Texans this week, where the media, it would seem collectively, is like, you know what, they're still good, but they're not the juggernaut that maybe we thought they would be this year, because we're almost to Thanksgiving and it seems like these teams are a little skippy, a little young, a little inconsistent. How would you draw any other conclusion watching these two teams? Right now, the Texans have dealt with more injuries around CJ Stroud. The Packers have dealt with an injury to Jordan Love. The rest of their team has remained pretty darn healthy, but Jordan Love's been in and out. Now, they've won those games with Malik Willis, but I think it's made it more difficult for the team when Jordan Love has come back from injury to hum right away because of the in and out, and because of the missing practice, whatever. I think all of that analysis that I just played for you is accurate. I think it's fair. I think it's astute. I actually really like McCourty and Garrett's analysis back to back, because McCourty saying, man, I don't think they're that. And Jason Garrett kind of saying, well, but there's a lot of football left, and who knows, maybe they could be about to go on. I think there's both a lot of truth in both those comments, and I like playing them back to back. I think that's a really well-rounded bit of analysis from NBC, which normally Football Night in America is like just what I throw on the TV in between the 3 o'clock and the Sunday night game, but every once in a while you get a good nugget. The Packers and the Texans aren't the Lions. We all agree on that. I don't think they're far from the Chiefs and the Bills, but I don't think they're the Chiefs and the Bills. The Chiefs and the Bills aren't loaded rosters like Detroit. It's just that Mahomes and Allen are so good, they can take pretty solid rosters and be on the level of Detroit, who's got an outstanding roster, right? The Packers aren't going to destroy teams week by week by week like Detroit is. Detroit has wins this season of 46, 38, and 38. Now, by the end of the season, I would love to see the Packers do that once or twice. I'd like to see them have a day where everything lines up and they just wallop a team. I thought maybe we get that against the Bears, but the Bears fighting for their season post-firing of the offensive coordinator makes sense. I would have liked to see it in Jacksonville, but then Jordan Love gets hurt, so that kind of threw a... They've had opportunities to just blast teams, and they haven't done it. I still think they have it in them, but they're not going to do it with the frequency that we've seen the Detroit Lions do it, right? They're not going to wallop teams, and they're not stacked and streamlined like Detroit. But they could absolutely beat the Lions in a playoff game, right? Is anyone disagreeing with that? Is anyone discounting the idea that the Packers could go into Detroit in the division round and beat them? They wouldn't be favored, but the idea that the Packers are going to go to Detroit and it's just a heavyweight versus a lightweight. Packers can hang in that game. Packers can absolutely hang in that game. Likewise, the Texans aren't polished like the Chiefs or the Bills. They've suffered some injuries and some setbacks. But with a healthy Nico Collins and a healthy Tank Dell, they could totally beat one of those two teams. So the conversations that we're having right now, and what are we in, week 11, right? We are comparing style points. We're comparing the polish and the maturity of these teams. Detroit's a couple more years along. Mahomes and Allen, a couple more years along versus CJ Stroud. So those teams are going to have a little bit more consistency, a little bit more polish in the regular season. But the Packers and the Texans, they're a combined 14-7, and both of those teams are comfortably within the range of get hot at the end of the year and completely ruin someone's postseason. And the thing is, if Houston pulls off one upset in the divisional round, whether it's Buffalo or Kansas City, who's to say they can't win again? It's not like, well, if you upset Detroit, then you got to contend with the Niners, who are 10-1. No, you upset Detroit, the conference can be yours. If the Texans upset the Bills or the Chiefs, the conference can be theirs. So remember, Packers fans, we go week by week by week, and we nitpick the Packers after losses. Here are the issues, and we will, because that's what Sports Talk Radio is for. Man, I tell you what, they're 7-3, and again, I'm going to keep using this line. They are better positioned in the NFC to go on a run than everyone except for Detroit and maybe Philly. I'm not even going to give Philly that yet, but I think Philly could join that group. Okay, so they're 2, maybe 3 in the NFC. We've never seen a team that we consider to be third best make a Super Bowl. They're right there. They don't have the polish. They don't have the consistency week to week of Detroit, but why would they? Detroit's a couple more years along. Same in the AFC if we're talking about Houston. Of course, Buffalo and of course, Kansas City are a couple more years along. They've been in the league longer. Their coaches are more experienced. The quarterbacks are more experienced. So we can nitpick and talk about style points with Green Bay and Houston, but both of those two teams could absolutely still go on the Super Bowl run. Both of those two teams still have everything in front of them, even if stylistically they haven't matched the very, very best, the 1, 2, or 3 best teams in the NFL. If you have thoughts on this, we'd love to talk Packers with you next. 608-321-1670. Call, text. I'll give you a Bucks thought and a Packers thought before the show is done as well. And of course, Mike Clemens, just about an hour away. More of the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
I think the Houston Texans are fine. They're the Green Bay Packers of the AFC. They're a year away. They need another draft. They're a little bit thin. The Packers are a little young. Texans are a little thin. They both have good young coaches, really good young quarterbacks. They're just not ready to beat the Detroits or like the Buffaloes and Kansas Cities, but it's a good team.
So, again, to keep hammering this, the Packers are not the Lions. And the Texans, the Packers' counterpart in the AFC, many have made that connection for months and months and months before the season even started. They're not on the level of the Bills and the Chiefs, but to say the Packers aren't ready to beat the Lions, you can totally see them knocking off the Lions in the playoffs. Won't be favored. I wouldn't bet my mortgage on it, but to cast that possibility off in mid-November, I think is silly, and I think it's silly in the AFC too. Josh Allen's maybe playing the best football of his life, and they're really good on both lines of scrimmage. You're telling me if Nico Collins and Tank Dell get healthy and Joe Mixon's running this way and CJ Stroud gets hot, he couldn't beat the Bills, he couldn't beat this Chiefs team? I wouldn't pick them, but it's a pretty good spot to be if you're the second or third best team in your conference. And I think the Packers and the Texans could claim that right now, and they still have yet to play their best football. So just a reminder to Packers fans, week by week, we're going to continue to nitpick this team, but if they keep winning games and even improving marginally, they're still in an awesome spot. There's still a lot of football left to be played, which at this point in the season, I think should excite Packers fans. Sometimes with the Brewers, it's like, well, there's a lot of baseball left. And it's like, yeah, that's what we're worried about. That's what concerns us is the amount of baseball left on the schedule. The opposite for Packers fans. With the way that this team has started and the injury, specifically to Jordan Love, the rest of the team's been healthy, but to Jordan Love, in and out and missing practice, the idea that there's still so much runway left should be really exciting. 608-321-1670. I'll take your calls on whatever. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, I'm glad you're preaching this. It seems like after this Bears week, kind of a little negativity creeping up on the Packers.
A lot of negativity. And I think the bye week really throws some people cone. We expect the world coming out of a bye. And I'll be honest, I expected more, especially from the defense. I expected more from the defensive line, but the Bears are fighting for their season. They just fired an OC, and I think if that game wasn't coming off the bye, we'd probably look at it a little differently. For fair or unfair, I don't know. The bye always gets people stirred up.
Yeah, and I think people are, maybe thinking that was a lucky win. We escaped with a win, which is partially true, but, the defense special teams field goal unit did go out and make a play. They did block that field goal. It's not like he just missed it wide left or something.
Yeah, maybe I'd feel a little different if he'd missed it. That's a good point.
Yeah, exactly. So, we're in a good position, 7-3. Still a lot of improvement, but we've seen this team improve. So, I think second half of this year, just keep getting better. Stack small W's.
Look, if the Niners were 10-1 and the Eagles were 10-1 and they have looked like a wagon all year, and the Falcons are 9-2, then maybe the context changes a little bit. Because the bar that the Packers need to meet to be in the mix as a contender in the NFC is that much higher, right? I'm not really blown away by anyone from the West. I'm not blown away from anyone in the East. The Eagles could start blowing me away. They're trending that way, and I have my mind and my heart open to that possibility. The South, I think top to bottom is pretty poor, especially because Evans and Godwin are hurt. Part of the way we should view the Packers is relative to their competition. And other than Detroit, this NFC can be had. And again, to hammer this home, the Packers could beat Detroit in the playoffs. I could totally see that happening. Let's not discount that possibility. And I think some are.
Yeah, and Nick Wright was saying, or I think it was Nick Wright, or maybe it was Danny Parkins, but someone on Fox Sports was saying, Lions are basically a guaranteed punch ticket to the Super Bowl.
That's not how the NFL works, and it's never worked that way. You could talk about the NBA that way, Cone. I could see that in the NBA, but we're smarter than that. We're smarter than that with the NFL. We've seen too much to know that that's not how it works.
Yeah, and I think you could almost say that for the Chiefs just because they're the Chiefs, but it's the Detroit Lions at the end of the day. Sure, they've had a couple good years, but we got to the same game they did last year, right?
The Lions, or which team?
Actually, no. We made it further than the Lions last year in the playoffs, no?
Well, the Lions made it one more week. So the Lions
true.
The Lions beat the Rams, and then who did they get a bye? I can't remember. I'll have to pull up the playoff picture, but not a difference of a week, to your point, Cone. It's not like the Lions went leaps and bounds farther than the Packers last year.
Yeah, exactly. And then other than that, I mean, great win for the Badgers last night. Ultimate trap game scenario, but our boys, fought it out. John Blackwell, dog.
And seeing you brought that up, Cone, I appreciate the call. I think coming back after this break, I'll give you some Badger basketball thoughts, including a comment from Greg Gard that some of you need to hear. And I'll never tell you how to fan. I might encourage you how to fan. I'll never tell you how to fan. Some of you Badger sports fans, I'm telling you, there's a comment from Greg Gard last night following a question from Nick Osen. Shout out to Nick Osen. Some of you need to sit down and listen. So I say this with all the kindness in my heart. We'll get to that after the break. 608-321-1670. One more call in the meantime. Any more NFL thoughts? You want to get them in? Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, just thinking about the Packers. It's Uncle Packer.
Beautiful Uncle Packer.
And I just want to say a point. I want to get this across is that when is the time for the Packers to show us who they are on offense? I just think we need to have one of our receivers break out and be a big name receiver. We need our offense to come out this year or next year at the latest and have, like we had Jordy Nelson, who was a top receiver. We need somebody to come available and be a household name. I really want this offense to break out this year, to come up now to play with this Detroit team. And I agree with you. We can beat Detroit. We can beat Minnesota this year.
Yeah.
We just got to break out.
Look, there's some sports fans, and I keep bringing this up with the Bucs. It's even truer with the Packers. Because I think there's a snowball's chance in hell that the Bucs get this together and they go into a series against the Knicks or the Celtics, and it's like, and the Giannis and Dame thing works, and it's the longest of long shots to where I even struggle to bang that drum. But with this Packers team, right, they're not going to be favored in a game in Detroit, right? Let's say they meet in the divisional round. They're not going to be favored in that game. But Uncle Packer, come on. That's a game they can win. That's a game I could easily see them. I don't have to talk myself into that. They could line up against the Lions at Ford Field in January and win. I'm not saying I would pick them. They certainly wouldn't be favored, but it's realistic as hell that could happen.
Yeah, because this division, they play each other hard. That's why Chicago could beat us, because we play hard in this division.
Yeah.
That's just the way it always is. That Chicago game, if that would have been 2 weeks earlier, nobody would have even thought about Chicago that might have beat us. Because we play in this division hard. That was not that surprising that Chicago played us that hard to me. I was really happy we won. And I think we got to just come out now. And Jordan Love has got to be a top quarterback. He's got to prove it to us now. I'm excited.
Yeah, we need to stack some games with no interceptions. Like, let's start there. And your point about wide receivers stepping up, what happened at the end of last year when the Packers got it going? Aaron Jones started running really well. They already have that with Josh Jacobs. He's been excellent. Christian Watson came to life and made so many big plays. And to Jason Garrett's point, that clip that I played you on NBC Sports, and why don't I play that specific part one more time, basically saying they got a lot of football left. Jordan Love is healthy and practicing every day now, so they can actually build and stack successes and stack chemistry. And also, a play like that block kick, that could be something that gets a team going. Let me play that comment from Jason Garrett one more time. I know everyone makes fun of Jason Garrett, but I thought it was a good point, and I kind of like him. He's folksy.
He drives them down the field. And Rich Bisaccia, their special teams coach, I got a text from him. He saw what Kansas City did last week. He said, I got something for you too. Blocking that kick, that can be the kind of thing that can get a team going. So I'm still a Packer fan. I think they got a lot of football left in them.
I like Jason Garrett, but I don't complain about announcers because I'm an adult. I saw that it was announced today that the crew doing the Packers-Niners game coming up this weekend will be Tom Brady and Kevin Burkhardt. And I see so many Packers fans. Oh, again? Oh, no. You're a grown adult with a job. You put money in a 401k. You have health insurance. You're telling me your day's going to be ruined by the voices and the suits in the booth that are presenting the game to you? Just turn it down. Listen to the radio. Or again, be an adult and just don't let it bother you. Okay, couple minute break. We're going to come back. I want to talk Badgers basketball for a couple minutes. We don't need to stay on it long, but I do want to make sure I give you a Badgers basketball thought after last night's game and a Bucks thought after last night's game. Maybe we'll do that at 5 o'clock. We'll weave our Packers conversations throughout, and we still have Mike Clemens coming up in an hour. So a lot more of the Wisco Sports Show coming up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
That's, I think, the beauty of this team. I think it's the strength of this team. I felt all along that we have a lot of guys that could score. And, to be able to find, whether it's a matchup or whether it's somebody that has a hot hand or what the defense presents. I think it was a hard game for Winter and Crowell to play in just because of the size and the mobility and the shooting. And that takes their ability, obviously, off the table, but to score for us. But it's nice when you have a lot of options, and I've got a lot of guys that can go to, and good teams find ways and have different guys, pick them up each night. It doesn't necessarily, we don't have to depend on one or two guys. We have a lot of guys that are unselfish and are pretty skilled.
It's Greg Gard after last night's game answering a question about their depth of scoring, right? Because John Tonje scores 40 plus the other night, and he had 19 last night, including a couple of big moments down the stretch, some big shots, but also a couple of opportunities getting to the rim, drawing a foul, and making his free throws. God, how nice is it they have a guy that can trust to make free throws at the line? That's one of the biggest reasons that I'm going to miss Chucky Hepburn, and that's something I thought a lot about during this offseason. It's like, man, is there a guy on this team now who I can trust down the stretch to eat a foul and make free throws when you're clinging to a 1 or a 2 point game and you're playing the foul game back and forth and you're trying to ice a game? Who can you trust? Well, thank God for John Tonje, because I'm going to miss Chucky Hepburn for that. Hell, I still miss Bronson Koenig for that reason, and Frank Kaminsky for what it's worth. But I miss Bronson Koenig, Frank Kaminsky for a lot of reasons, not just, they hit their free throws in crunch time when you're trying to ice a game. It's not like John Tonje scored 6 points last night. He had 19 points and an efficient 19 points, 3 of 5 from the field and 10 of 10 from the line, which I like. But it was John Blackwell last night who provided the, volume scoring 30 points, and it took him a little time to get warmed up. There were tweets of a potential trap game, a potential trap moment against University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. I keep botching the acronym and tripping over my words, but UTRGV, the Vaqueros. There was talk of a trap game because it's like, man, not the same atmosphere as Friday night. You have a top 10 team in the Kohl Center Friday night. Final 4 teams back, Bo Ryan back, as much energy as you're ever going to have in a college basketball environment, certainly in November, right? Maybe in a tournament game, but then a tournament game is neutral site. The energy might be there, but it's still not the same as your home building. You compare Friday night to last night, Monday, no celebration of Bo Ryan, no Final 4 teams, no rowdy crowd that's maybe tuned up a little bit. And the opponent is not top 10 Arizona, it's Rio Grande Valley, right? Good program, bad program. It doesn't stack up. So you look at last night's game as a potential trap game. You come out a little flat. I thought they came out flat on defense. Greg Gard after the game talked about they weren't just lax underneath. The bigs struggled a little bit because the Vaqueros, a little bit smaller, 4 and 5, which presents challenges for Nolan Winter and especially Stephen Crowell getting out and defending on the perimeter. But it was also their perimeter defenders. Like, I don't know that Klesmet was dialed from the beginning. I don't think Blackwell was dialed from the beginning. And I think Friday night to last night, that difference in environment, that difference in energy, you're just in a little bit of a spot for an emotional letdown. I thought that showed on defense early, and they got hot, right? That was the first thing that Gard talked about in his presser last night. That's the kind of team that Rio Grande Valley is. They have 5 guys in their starting lineup who can all shoot threes. And if you let them get hot early, they start pulling from confidence. They start feeling themselves. And then you can adjust on defense and you can close out harder, but it doesn't always matter because at this point they're warmed up. You can play tighter defense on those 3-point shots. They've already seen a couple go through the hoop, which I think was Coach Bud's problem loosely at the end, especially in the bubble. They would start these games and they would leak off shooters. They would sag off shooters, be like, we're okay with that guy shooting. And then that guy would hit one or two, and then Bud would change his approach. But at this point, that guy that you were okay sagging off, he's hot now. So even if you tighten up defense on him, the shots are going to keep going in. And Bucks fans were beside themselves. It's like, why? These can't keep going in. These 3-point shots can't keep falling. But they're more likely to keep falling when you give the shooters a running start at the beginning of the game. And I thought the Badgers, for emotional letdown reasons, I think, got off to a little bit of a slow start defensively and tightened up in the second half, which isn't a surprise when you're in danger after beating Arizona of falling to Rio Grande Valley. You're going to tighten up in the second half. John Blackwell scoring 30 doesn't hurt. And that wasn't just perimeter shooting. That wasn't just threes and free throws. He was getting to the cup, which I really, really like. One soundbite that I want to play for you from Greg Gard, and I'm actually going to throw the video of Gard on the live stream as well. Thank you to Evan Flood for posting clips. So I'll shout out Evan Flood and Nick Osen, who asked the question. A player last night that had an impact, as sometimes he does, not that he'd ever get credit or praise from Badgers fans, is Carter Gilmore. He played 20 minutes, and he played some at the 5. Because Rio Grande Valley is a smaller team and they'll go 5 out, or they'll put their bigs, their quote unquote bigs, their 4 and their 5, even if it's really like playing another 3 and then a slightly maybe oversized 4 at center. All those guys can shoot. So Stephen Crowell becomes a little bit less useful. Wisconsin sizes down. John Tonje plays a little bit of the 4. And all of a sudden you need someone a little bit more mobile on the perimeter to play the 5. That's Carter Gilmore, someone with a lot of experience, someone who's been asked to do a lot of different things, often thanklessly. Badgers basketball fans, we don't often think of Carter Gilmore. He's more of just a punchline and a thing that Badgers fans, I think, too often complain about. After the game last night, here's Greg Gard talking about the importance of Carter Gilmore, his makeup, and this is following a question from Nick Osen. Again, if you're watching on the live stream on the simulcast, you'll see the video too. This is courtesy of Evan Flood off of YouTube. I always appreciate him posting the clips.
Yeah, I mean, he's bounced on and off scholarship his whole career here. Came in as a walk-on. He just loves the program. You know, obviously his DNA goes really, really deep in our coaching tree with his dad playing for Bo and Platteville. But you know, so he's grown up around it. He understands it, and he's a consummate team player. And the versatility, the positional versatility, the ability to switch and keep the ball in front of us. And I think the biggest thing with him, Nick, is the experience. You know, he's been there. He has a leg up on what Zay just hasn't had, that experience in how we defend. And it's harder for Steve and Nolan because they're bigger, and, you know, their advantages being 7 feet, their disadvantages, the ability to move and have to recover to shooters and that type of thing. So you like to have those tweener type guys for these games, that when you have to match that type of offensive flow, it helps you somewhat get it under control a little bit better.
So Gard specifically talking about the basketball utility of Carter Gilmore, right? Because Xavier Amos, they tried him a little bit at the 5, but he's new. And as Gard has talked about for weeks, the offensive stuff comes a little bit faster. Defense is a little bit more of a process to learn, especially when you're changing programs. So Carter Gilmore, who's been around, probably in a little bit better position to slide in and play an undersized 5 in kind of a funky matchup like last night's was, especially when the opponent. Look, if Rio Grande Valley just has a bad night from 3, we're probably not even talking about this game at all, because Wisconsin wins comfortably and they're not really forced to make adjustments or changes. Or if they make those adjustments or changes, we're not really parsing it out. We're not really looking at it because who cares? It wasn't close, and who cares about Rio Grande Valley State anyways? But Xavier Amos not really ready to go full bore defensively and to be trusted to play the 5 on a night where Crowell and Nolan Winter can't, because Rio Grande Valley, I said Grand Valley State, is smaller, so Carter Gilmore slides in. The basketball utility of Carter Gilmore in a night like last night is apparent. The personality stuff, Badgers fans, we beat up on this guy. I brought this up last week. It's like some of you sickos, it's like John Tonje could have an awesome game, and John Blackwell could have a great game, and you know, Klesmit's defending, and he'll good to turn into Klay Thompson for a 4-minute stretch in the second half of lots of games. Like, Badgers could have a great game and win comfortably, but Carter Gilmore commits one dumb foul or he drops one rebound. It's like, it's all you guys want to complain about. And I just, for the, the 9th or 10th guy on this roster, a little bit higher than that, but you get my point. For a borderline scholarship player, I think we pay him a little bit too much negative attention, Badgers fans, especially on the internet, which I get's what the internet's for negativity, not for hating on Carter Gilmore. It's like, I get it. The internet's all for ripping Carter Gilmore. It's what it's for. No, it trends more negative, especially on Twitter. But to hear Greg Gard talk about that, it's like this program means so much to him. He loves it here. Isn't that like what we want to hold on to as college basketball continues to change and guys are moving around more and program identity feels less and less defined? I don't know. Seems to me that Carter Gilmore has a lot of traits that actually Badgers basketball fans should love, but because he's the 8th guy on the roster and occasionally commits a dumb foul or misses a 3-point shot, it's all we ever want to complain about and talk about. Badgers fans, I'm sorry, but you listen to that. Go rewatch that presser. Listen to that comment again. Try to set your priorities a little bit. Back to the Packers. I'm going to get to some of your texts next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. Just had to give you a Badgers take or two for wrapping up the first hour of the show. I'll give you a Bucks take after the top of the hour, after 5 o'clock as well. Mike Clemens going to join us at 5:30. But I know that most of you want to talk football, so we can continue to do that. Going to get to some texts here. 608-321-1670. I got a text, first-time text from this number, which always jumps out to me. Because if you've never texted before, you're either new to the show, and if that's the case, welcome. Or you've simply listened for a while and never felt compelled to text, and we've brought up something or we've covered ground that really fired you up. This text says, unless Love plays like he did last season, there's no way in hell they can beat the Lions. Right? So we're circling back now to where we began the show. And my point was, and I'll be very efficient in recapping, the Texans and the Packers have not been the juggernauts this year in the regular season so far that a lot of analysts or fans maybe thought they could be. But the dismissal of the Packers and the Texans as teams that could make Super Bowl runs, that's laughable to me. To call the NFC for Detroit and to cast aside every other team, to call the AFC for Buffalo and Kansas City and to say everyone else is done. Have we never watched football before? That's not how it works. The NBA, that's how it works. Maybe you get a surprise team to make a run to the conference finals, but almost never all the way. The NFL, way too many people are like, it's the Chiefs and the Bills and then everyone else, maybe the Ravens. And then in the NFC, I mean, it's Detroit. No one's close. Well, yeah, when it comes to popping teams week by week, yeah, Detroit, because they're the most experienced. They're the most battle-tested. Their coach has been there for a while. Amon-Ra St. Brown and others are older. Jared Goff's more older in season than most of Jordan Love or, Sam Darnold, the younger quarterbacks in the NFC. But to act like the Packers couldn't go into Detroit in the divisional round and win, have you never watched the NFL playoffs before? CJ Stroud could beat Buffalo. Buffalo dumped its pants at home in a perfect spot last year. Now, that was to Kansas City, but Kansas City's not a perfect roster. They're probably even more imperfect this year because actually a lot of good wide receiving options that they added this offseason, or Rashee Rice, who took another step, they're all hurt. To act like, well, the Packers and the Texans, they're not ready. Yeah, they're not ready to be streamlined regular season killing machines like Detroit it, but who cares? It's a 4-quarter game, a one-off in January. And the Packers and the Texans are both good enough to win a one-off against even the best teams in football, of course. Chris Inacio says Lions lost to the 49ers in the NFC Championship game after leading big in the first half. Yeah, and you're helping because Cone and I were kind of tripping over like, how far did the Lions go? Yeah. Tony in Texas says Packers over-under before the season was 9.5 wins. They're on pace for 11 or 12. Packers are on the right track and absolutely can beat the Lions or any other team in the playoff. Thank you, Tony. Yes. I'm saying they are not streamlined and perfected like Lions. Like if I was a sports bettor, I'd bet Detroit to cover spreads. Green Bay, I don't know quite what I'm going to get week to week because they're a little younger, a little messier, but they're still on pace to probably crush their win total, knock on wood, because their quarterback's now moving forward healthier than he's been literally since the fourth quarter of week 1 when they played in South America. Like that was even a weird game. And I'm not dismissing the loss because it's a game they could have won, but I don't know. The dismissal of the Packers and the Texans, and the reason I'm lumping the Texans into this is because we watched the Texans last night win another game where everyone kind of went, still don't really see it, right? And the Packers and the Texans have been compared really since the end of last season, since Super Bowl week. It was all the talk. CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, right? 2 guys moving forward. Who would you take? And 1 in each conference, that kind of stuff. Duck and Holman says at least it's not Joe Aikman and Troy Buck with no pants on. It's how they identify Grant. You hate those two. Sully in Menominee says nothing says privilege quite like complaining about the announcers of a sporting event. Yeah, I'm going to keep banging this drum. Look, if you're bent out of shape because Tom Brady's calling the Packer game again on Sunday, I said this before the second break of the show. I'm assuming most of the people listening to the show are employed or in between employments. You are an adult that receives a paycheck every week. You have a 401k. You pay a mortgage. You have health insurance. Stop getting mad about the voice who's commenting on your football game every Sunday. It's just, I have guys that I prefer, but you know what? The number ones on all of these networks are all pretty good. They're all pretty solid. Tirico and Collinsworth are solid. Does Collinsworth get a little the humanity? Collinsworth is waxing a little too poetic about a great football player. Oh my God. What an unwatchable, unlistenable product. Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. I think they're great. Oh, I hate Aikman. Oh, because he was on the Cowboys team that beat up your Packers for you. Is that why? Okay. Again, you're an adult. Tom Brady's not perfect, but I actually have enjoyed Tom Brady's analysis of Jordan Love because I think Jordan Love could learn so much from Tom Brady in the way that Tom Brady played the game. For example, that Lions game a couple of weeks ago, and maybe I'll be able to pull up the audio here if I just look at the calendar. So the Lions game was November 3rd, right? So I would have had that audio November 4th. I have a very detailed, itemized list of all my audio. So November 4th, did I say? Brady's commentary on Jordan Love, I thought it was brilliant. Here it is right here. I'll play it for you. I like hearing Tom Brady get to talk about Jordan Love because I get to hear stuff like this.
Here is Love.
This, by the way, is a play late in that Lions game where he's running around and the ball slipped out of his hand. And it's like, what are you doing? It's 2nd and 1, man. And they're bearing down on the end zone.
Here is Love. Can't find anyone. Rolling all the way in deep trouble. And now he loses and he hits. Boy, that could have been an absolute disaster.
Again, it's not needed at that point. It's 2nd and 1. You've got 2 more downs. At some point, hand it off to get the first down here. If it's not there, you can't have negative plays. And again, this is just a little bit what reminds me of what happened before half. You try to do too much. And again, you do that as a player with not a lot of experience. It's all about decision making. It's all about processing the moment that you're in. The moment doesn't require that type of play. Make the easy play.
There you go. That's good analysis. It's maybe not perfectly polished. Of course, it's his first year in the booth. Brady's fine. Everyone can calm down. We can get a quick call in here. We got about 2 minutes, so be efficient, but we got time. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Hello? You're up. Hello? You're the only caller. If you hear my... Okay, well. Never mind. We don't have time anymore. Forget it. We'll do it live. Oh, and also Nance and Romo are pretty fun. Romo gets off the rails a little bit sometimes. And my favorite's Buck and Aikman because Buck lets it breathe, especially in a high leverage game with crowd and aura and atmosphere. I don't need the blah, 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 blah. I don't need the jibber jabber. Romo can go a little overboard with the jibber jabber, but he's also fun. If the game stinks, if it's a blowout, Romo gives you some fun commentary. Let's all calm down. All calm down to reread Sully and Menominee's text. Nothing says privilege quite like complaining about the announcers of a sporting event. Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, we're privileged. We have time to waste on sports, watching sports, talking about sports on the radio, calling and texting each other. So we're all privileged in that sense. It's what we do, but be an adult. Stop losing your mind over the voice that's commentating your favorite team on Sundays. It's just not that big of a deal. When we come back, we can continue to talk Packers. Maybe I'll reiterate my point from the beginning of the show and we can react to Monday Night Football last night because I think there's some good nuggets, mostly with the Texans. I don't know that there's a lot to be said about the Cowboys. They stink, and we've known that they stink for a while. But with the Texans, I think there's some really instructive details, especially with our Packers, as we've kind of been hinting out throughout the show. If you're just joining us, I can also give you a Bucks thought. I thought Doc Rivers had a good comment or two after the game last night. Oh, yeah, and don't forget, Mike Clemens yet to join us at 5:30 to talk Packers as well. More of the Wisco Sports Show, hour number 2, coming up next.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, it's an off day for the Packers. They're going to get back on the field tomorrow, start preparing for a visit from the 49ers coming up on Sunday. San Francisco just 5-5 of the year. Has dealt with a lot of injuries to key players much of the season, but they still have been a favorite every week until this week. Packers currently favored by 2.5. Kick on Sunday is set for 3:25. Turning to the Badgers. They're going to head to Nebraska this Saturday, looking to become bowl eligible. They will do so with a new play caller after offensive coordinator Phil Longo was fired. Coach Luke Fickell did not say who would call plays, though the Athletic is reporting it will be tight ends coach Nate Letton. What won't change is who is at quarterback. That will be Braden Locke, according to Fickell.
Never a doubt. I don't know what else the idea is, right? I mean, we all have to, put some pressure on different people. And again, Braden's had a lot on his plate, and he's got to continue to grow and get better, and he knows that. And, we're going to give him a better opportunity to be able to do that.
Again, it'll be Wisconsin and Nebraska on Saturday in Lincoln. Kick is at 2:30.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the Wisconsin basketball team is 5-0 for the second time. Under Coach Greg Garr, they held on for a win over UT Rio Grande Valley last night. 19th-ranked Badgers now going to face UCF on Friday in the Greenbrier tip-off. And the Bucks back in action tomorrow as they host the Bulls at Fiserv Forum. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, Print.
Why does it matter? Right? I mean, the offense will, be run, and those guys will do a lot of things collaboratively together, and I don't think it really is important as to who's calling you.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Phone lines lighting up. I know you guys have Packers takes. You want to continue to talk football. I'll give you a Bucks thought, maybe at 5:15, 5:20, and then we'll wrap up with Mike Clemens. Just how you draw up a Thursday show or a Tuesday show. He's also with us on Thursdays, but doesn't get any better. Get back to your phone calls here in just a minute. I want to give a shout out to one of our presenting sponsors in Eau Claire, Kai Chevytown in Menominee. It's less than a mile. It's like a golf ball throw off of exit 4194 on the north side of town. Super easy to get to. They've been helping people get the cars that they need for literally 3 generations. I mean, it's as trusted of a brand and as a family and as a dealership as you'll find anywhere in the state of Wisconsin and probably anywhere in the country. They helped put me in my Malibu a couple of months ago, and I absolutely love it. And the Red Tag event is going on now through the end of the year. So if you've been waffling, you're like, yeah, I need to get a new car, and you've been kind of putting it off. That's what I was doing, and then my old car just made the choice for me. It said, nope, we're going to do it now because I'm done. This drive down 94 will be my last. So that decision was made for me. I would recommend making that decision a little bit earlier than I did and take advantage of their Red Tag event because there's huge sales and rebates and discounts, and they throw you some bones on financing. And if you're leasing, they have specials for that too. I'm not going to pretend to be a business expert and give you the percentages and the points, but this is their big end of year special that they run, their Red Tag event. And even if you're not looking at getting or leasing a new vehicle or a new to you vehicle, they have great service specials too. So even if you have a car that you're thrilled with, Kai Chevytown, their service department is outstanding. And the way that I describe it, it feels like a big dealership with the accessibility and the ease of use of a small dealership. Because I've been to dealerships, especially in Madison and Milwaukee, were just huge. And it's nice to have all those resources. Like, it's nice to have 20 service bays with all those mechanics, but when you pull up, it's just overwhelming. It's like, what door do I go in? I talked to someone on the phone, but Jesus, there's 36 people. Kai's is great. 2 big doors, you pull up, it's the same face the service department's been for a long time. So even if you're not in the market for a new car, go get whatever service that you've needed. We've all been putting off our service. Go take advantage of that on tires, brakes, rebates on other service and maintenance items. Take that into consideration before the end of the year and take advantage of their Red Tag event. Kai's Chevytown on the north side of Menominee. BYC Kai's for the best buys online at ChevytownUSA.com. Back to your Packers thoughts or whatever. I don't want to limit you. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Hello?
Yeah, man, how here, Grant? How you doing?
Hey, Ryan. What's going on?
Hey, I just want to ask you something. What's it going to take for Matt LaFleur to finally just feed him?
You cut out for a sec. What's it going to take for Matt LaFleur to finally do what?
Feed it to Watson on a regular basis. He's the star.
So I love Christian Watson. We talked about this yesterday. I think he's awesome. My problem with the idea of just featuring the heck out of him in a game plan is it seems like every time they've tried to do that, it ends in a ball going into triple coverage and then Christian Watson gets nailed on a hospital ball. Like that, they haven't been able to find a way to naturally do it. And maybe they just need to do a better job, but that's what scares me about that line of thinking, Ryan, and I've thought about that myself.
I understand the hospital ball side of it, and can you still hear me okay?
Yep, I got you. It was just a second that you cut out. Yep, you're good.
I'm in a weird spot on I-90. I might as well be Eric on I-90's replacement today.
You probably passed him out there. He's just out there doing laps.
Yeah, obviously it's on Jordan Love not to throw Watson a hospital ball. And number two, it's about, I had a, don't you hate when that happens?
No. You think for a second. I'll bounce off what you just said. I agree that Jordan Love carries some responsibility here. Like some of the balls that he's thrown to Watson, including the one down the boundary, he's in double coverage. You know what I mean? So I want to make sure that Jordan Love is being held responsible for some of these decisions too. Just because you have the arm talent to put it in a tight window in between defenders doesn't mean you should, especially if it means Christian Watson is going to get crushed. So yeah, I agree with you that Jordan Love carries a lot of responsibility in avoiding that as well.
And that's not to say every week Watson should be the feature. Sometimes it should change. Wicks has got to step up his game and stop dropping passes. He's really got to stop that. And before everyone gets too on the second-year Devontae Adams comparison, let's just take it for what it is and be patient. And
I think so. I would agree on Wicks. Ryan, you're just cutting out a little bit, so I'm going to let you go. I almost said Devontae Wicks. Jesus. Dontavian Wicks could find a nice little spot in this offense in the red zone. Dontavian, I keep wanting to say Devontae. Damn it. Wicks. Let's just say Wicks. Old DW. Dontavian Wicks, DW. DW could fill a need in the red zone, especially they get down along the goal line and they just lock up. And Dontavian Wicks' best feature is his ability to separate and create space and to get open. And down in the red zone, I hold the belief that that's really important. I don't know that this is backed up in football literature. If you're a football coach, maybe you would tell me that I'm wrong here. I've always believed that once you get inside the 20s or you're operating on fourth down and short, the gotta have it moments when you're in a small piece of real estate on the field. It becomes more about the Jimmies and the Joes than it does the X's and the O's, right? It becomes a lot harder to scheme a guy wide open when you're on the 4-yard line because there's less space to scheme, right? There's less real estate in which to work. Dontavian Wicks being able to cross someone up at the goal line and get open would be such a boon to this offense if he could just catch the ball. We saw it against the Lions. He got open. He was in a position to help Jordan Love do something that's been a struggle this year, which is score a touchdown, to punch it in, and he dropped it. And I know, the ball was thrown a little bit behind him, but this is the NFL. Like, come on. These are some balls that we need to pull in. Dontavian Wicks could fill a huge need. He could become a crucial part of this offense if he could just catch the ball because he can separate on a level that's, it's not really paralleled in the NFL. He's top 5 in separation. He was last year as a rookie before anybody even knew who he was. He gets open, and you need that on the goal line. The problem is he can't catch the ball, and at some point you can't keep throwing it to him. You can't just keep funneling targets his way, waiting for him to start catching the ball. It's just too harmful, especially when you have other good options. 608-321-1670, continuing to take your calls. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Hello? Yes. Who's this?
Oh, it's Kristen, formerly of Chris and Chippewa.
Oh, and where are we now, Chris?
Thorpe.
Oh, in Thorpe. I thought you said Chris. Okay, Chris and Thorpe. Well, how are things in Thorpe today?
Small town.
All right. We can leave it at that. That's fine. What's going on?
So I just want to do 2 things. One, funny story, because my brother lives on the West Coast, huge Ducks fan. So of course, we were texting back and forth during the Badgers game, and I couldn't really talk any smack because, it was the Badgers. And at one point in time, he sends me this GIF. This is your quarterback. It was a dumpster on fire floating down a river, and I couldn't really argue with him.
Yeah, not much you could say back to that. And look, he seems like a good kid. And I say that because he is a kid now. He is a couple years my junior, but he just doesn't have it. And there's no sense in making it personal and piling on, but he does not have it on the field.
He might have been an awesome high school quarterback, but he is not a college quarterback.
No.
I don't know if the stage is just too big for him or what, but
look, you could have worse backups. There's worse backups.
Yeah.
He'd be a great backup, but the problem is when you need the backup to start the entire year, then that becomes a little bit of a problem.
Right. So my real thing was I was calling in about the Packers. I've listened to Bill today, and I've been listening to you, and everybody's talking about, I kept hearing this word potential. Well, maybe I'm just being negative, but to me, potential is a fart in the wind, man. It doesn't mean anything if you can't harness it and do something with it. yeah, the team's 7-3. We're in the playoff hunt, but the problem that I see is I feel like it's all smoke and mirrors this year. Like, I think we are, man. It's a hard product to watch right now because
you really think it's that. I get saying as a Packers fan, well, I know we're 7-3, but it doesn't feel like we've reached our potential yet. I get that. To say that the whole season's been smoke and mirrors, I think that's a little too Johnny Raincloud. But expand, tell me why you feel that way. Maybe I'm just missing it.
I don't feel like the team has yet to put together an entire game. Like
okay.
In how many games have we just basically squeezed through? Like we had no business winning that Bears game. The Bears should have won that game.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I was telling a friend of mine who's another Packers fan. I was like, look, it may be a win in the actual column, but I consider that game a loss because there's no reason that game should have been that close. And we got lucky that dude managed to block that field goal. Like, that's plain and simple. We got lucky.
So, okay, you gave me a lot to unpack there. I think we're going to leave it there, and I'll bounce back to that. Thank you for listening and calling in Chippewa, or not Chippewa, but Thorpe. Go Cardinals. Same mascot, so maybe that's why I'm getting crossed up. Appreciate it, Chris. Smoke and mirrors is too much for me. It's just, I'm going to sound like a coach at a press conference. It's too hard to win in the NFL for a team to be 7-3 and to chalk it up to smoke and mirrors. And I understand some of those games were against the AFC South. Okay, but those games were started by Malik Willis. You know what I mean? Smoke and mirrors is a bridge too far, right? To say that they've gotten lucky here and there, yeah. All right. I don't know. The Packers offense was a little bit better against the Bears. The further I remove myself from that game, they punted once. They got stopped on the goal line on 4th down, and Jordan Love threw a pick. Other than that, they kind of moved the ball up and down the field at will. And don't get me wrong, I'm sick of coming away from all these Packer games and saying, well, other than the interception, like at some point, you got to stop saying that. You know what I mean? Like, we don't do that with Braden Locke. Braden Locke throws a pick every week, and it's not like, well, other than the pick. No, the pick is where we start with Braden Locke. And Jordan Love is not Braden Locke because he does more good things than Braden Locke does. But at some point, like, you're a pick a game, especially when they're in the red zone. Or in the case of Detroit, it's a pick six. Like, both of those interceptions led to touchdowns, either on the return from the interception or the Bears driving all the way down before half and turning what could have been a Packers touchdown if that ball's on target to a touchdown for the Bears. That's literally a 14-point swing. So I think the Packers were lucky against the Bears in some respects. They were unlucky in others. They're also just a well-buttoned up team relative to the Bears. They're not buttoned up on the level of some elite regular season teams, but they're not the Bears. Smoke and mirrors again. A bridge too far for me. I get some frustration. Bridge too far is smoke and mirrors. I think that's too strong. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
It's Darnell.
Darnell, what do you think of all this, Darnell?
Well, I think that most Packer fans right now are being a little bit too harsh with the Packers. Like you just said, in the NFL, it is so hard to win. And the fact that you're 7-3 right now, considering, and I don't always do this because I think that it's stupid to just be like, oh, well, remember where we were week 1? Now we'd be really happy with a 7-3 record. I'm over the moon to be 7-3 right now with the hardships and just general issues that the team has had for the first 2+ months of the season.
And the North's better than I think we thought it would be. We thought the North would be pretty good. The Lions are better than I thought they would be, and I thought they'd be great. The Vikings are much better. And the Packers got them in a spot where they were going to get a really good game. Had they played the Bears 3 weeks ago, I think they paced them. But the timing is not just, I hate hitting you guys over the head with all these cliches, but I'm sorry. It's not just about who you play. It's about when you play them. That matters too, Darnell.
Absolutely. And I honestly think that the Bears are better than their record. I think so. More than likely they should probably have 6 wins right now. But that's not how the NFL works. You have to be both lucky and skilled at the same time in order to win games in the NFL. And it's just like a couple of calls here and there go against you. And it's tough. A couple of dropped passes that turn into interceptions or that, get knocked away, or it's such a game of inches that, you just kind of have to take the good with the bad sometimes. And the Packers have had some good luck, but you have to remember, they've also lost 3 one-score games that they could have definitely won those games. They've won 4 or 5 games that they definitely could have lost. It's kind of a crapshoot in the NFL, so let's be happy that we're on the good side of some of these games, as opposed to, maybe not being where, whatever. The point is, the Packers offense can be so much better than it has been. So I think that moving forward, going into Thanksgiving and then beyond, that's where we saw the Packers flourish last year. So that's what I'm looking forward to as far as like being a Packers fan and whatnot. Also, one other thing, Badger basketball last night, that was like an insane shooting performance from UT, what is it, Rio Grande?
Grand Valley, Rio, yes. Rio Grande Valley, yes. The Vaqueros. No, you're right. And Greg Gard, that's the first thing he said. And Darnell, I'm sorry, I got to run. Look, I'll always give credit to the Badgers. It was a great shooting performance. Wisconsin adjusted and they clamped down, I think, after being a little emotionally hungover in the first half, which is completely and totally reasonable. People forget that Braden Narveson was the kicker for this team for a month. They're just hemorrhaging points. It was completely shaping the way they were operating once they would get inside the opponent's 40. Like smoke and mirrors, they didn't have a kicker or a healthy quarterback. A healthy starting quarterback, I should say. Let's take a break. We getting a little bit closer with every passing segment towards Mike Clemens, who's going to be here at about 5:35. Any final Packers thoughts? And maybe I'll give you a Bucs thought or two. And also a significant firing made in the NFL today, probably to take heat off of what's going on in Madison. A general manager was fired, Joe Douglas. We could talk about that next as well.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Is a smart person?
You mean as far as negotiating, like in this negotiation?
Yeah, who
I mean,
are
it's
they?
Joe Douglas and Brian Gutekunst.
Oh, Gutekunst, we're just automatically assuming he's a smart person?
I mean, I think
Joe Douglas is proved as Gutekunst.
Oh,
I mean, that's an interesting, right? I think.
Yeah, I think he's pretty. I think he's an NFL general manager. Those guys.
Oh yeah, there've never been general manager. The New York Jets have fired their general manager, Joe Douglas.
Wow.
Whoa. This morning. Joining us now, Ray, to talk about it, ladies and gentlemen, senior NFL insider for ESPN, Adam Schefter. Schefter, this is, I don't know if it's, Aaron will not be on today because they're in the middle of a bye week. So is that why they made this decision? Because they're on the bye week? How long has this been kind of in the works? And what does this mean for the future, Schefter?
Well, it means that it's a complete overhaul in New York with the Jets. And it means that Woody Johnson obviously was losing patience. And when you watch the team, you can't help but be discouraged right now. They obviously were going to be in a head coaching search. Now it's going to be a head coach and GM search. Joe Douglas's contract was up after this season. I don't know that he wanted to stay there anyway, but the Jets made it simple on him today. And obviously Woody Johnson fired him this morning.
More changes in New York. Joe Douglas fired today, which I guess, shoot, why not fire your GM before Thanksgiving? Like at this point, I saw a stat from Doug Clausen today on Twitter. I bookmarked it. He is a Christ follower and a researcher and writer with CBS Sports. The first part really not pertinent to this segment, but he listed it first in his bio, and I'm using his tweet. So Christ follower. The Jets have been favored in the same number of games as the Chiefs and the Bills this year. Historic underachievement. I never really think about where the market set these lines and how performance relates to market, because you always say good teams win, great teams cover. Okay, well, what about teams that are supposed to be great, and not only do they not win, but they never cover? The Jets have been favored in a couple games the last few weeks. I haven't gotten it. They suck. But again, I'm done at this point. I've very, very, very short radio career relative to some. I've only been on the radio 6 years. I know better than to hammer Vegas for getting lines wrong, but I don't really know what they've been doing with the Jets. They suck, and it's obvious. And Joe Douglas, we hardly knew ye. 608-321-1670 if you have a Packers thought, NFL thought. A couple minutes to get two more calls in here before Mike Clemens. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, Tony from Texas.
Tony.
You are like the great Sterling Sharp. Made a huge impact, 7-8 years with the Packers.
Oh.
This day, 1989, the Packers upset the 49ers. So, 14-2 49er squad. Packer history there. Hey,
appreciate that.
I watch a lot of Cowboys and Packer fans and Cowboys fans. We watch these games together. You know what they call us, me and you? Spoiled, entitled. Why are you always bitching? Oh, you can't rush the passer. Ooh, you threw an interception. You guys are 7-3. You guys make the playoffs every year. They would kill to have this team in Dallas. What you saw last night was an embarrassment. And it's going to get Mike McCarthy eventually fired again.
It's bad.
But our team was 9.5 was over under for wins this year. It's not like we were the Chiefs or something, or the 49ers coming into this year.
And we're not, let me be clear, I'm not bitching that they haven't looked better. We're analyzing. It's sports talk radio. That's what we do. Oh, 7-3, they're great. All right, let's talk about the Bucs. Like, no, we're going to do that. Although we, talk about the Bucs a little. But I know you're not saying that of me. I'm just adding on. Like, if there's anyone listening who's like, they're 7-3, what is there even to talk about? Well, it's a 2-hour daily talk show, so we're going to talk about something related to the Packers. We're going to nitpick.
We have no pass rush. We're 29th in the red zone. I mean, that's something to worry about. But we have a kick-ass running game, a great wide receiving core. We fixed our kicking issues. Our special teams are better. Our defensive backs are making plays.
Yeah, how about
we got
that?
a good young core. A lot of good things.
I think
to work on.
I think if this team gets close but doesn't finish the deal this year, if we're talking, let's just say making a Super Bowl, if they're getting to the conference championship game, I think what kills them is the secondary. They don't have enough good corners. They don't have enough players at that position, which I thought was a big position need coming into the year. Goody didn't feel that way. I'm still not convinced he feels that way. I think he likes Valentine and Stokes, and I think he's ultimately going to be wrong because if Jair gets hurt, I think the cornerback room is porked.
Yeah, and I think Goots played his chips ultimately pretty good throughout his tenure, but the Rasul Douglas trade is bite him in the ass this year. Great point, Grant. I do give him a puncher's chance in the playoffs. Sure, I wouldn't pick the Packers, but any given Sunday, I know it's a cliche, they can beat them. And I'm glad this is a divisional foe, too.
Look,
it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row.
Well, right, and the thing is, like, the Packers aren't going to be scared of the Lions and Ford Field. The Lions are a good team, and the Packers would be up against it, but they play there every year. It's an opponent they've already seen twice. So some of that shock and awe goes away. It's the same with Lamar. Lamar destroys every NFC opponent that he plays, but as soon as he's got to play the Steelers, they're like, no, we see you twice a year, man. Like this isn't anything crazy for us. They don't get starstruck and awestruck by the Ravens. And I would go so far as to say I give the Packers better than a puncher's chance. I give them a solid chance. They're not going to be favored, but way too many people are just calling the NFC for Detroit. That's not how football works.
Yeah. I mean, who was favored the last few years? The 49ers. They didn't win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the Niners, I think this Detroit team is as good as any NFC power, any number one seed. And I'm just saying whether they get the number one seed or not, I'm pretty sure they will. But even if they don't, like they're the premier team in the conference right now. I don't know. The Bucks have a snowball's chance in hell. The Packers have, I think, a very solid chance. Like I'd go into that playoff game excited. More excited than I've gone into some Packers playoff games where the Packers weren't favored. See Niners, San Francisco every time they've played. 608-321-1670. One more call, and then we're going to get to Mike Clemens. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Eric on I-90.
I knew it. Eric, good evening. Take us home.
Are charging down I-90 westbound on a Tuesday night. And I'm liking a lot of shout-outs for roads that people are on. I think it's a popular thing. I do. I like that.
Yeah.
You know, we're all driving home and listening.
Yeah.
Kind of the last thing we get before we get home. You know?
The great super slab connects us all. It's one thing that we have connecting us American commuters. Yep.
All right. Well, let's get into this Packer talk. This is what I'm seeing. You know, it's the eyeball test, and I think the Packer fans are calling in with, I'm a fan of the fan, okay? And I think they're calling in, and their eyeballs it's this eyeball test, they just don't look good. Now, the Vikings, listen now, this has got nothing to do with the Vikings, because the Vikings don't look good either. They just don't look good. And I'm going to say this, that if Green Bay plays the type of football they've been playing for the past 3 weeks, they're not going to beat the Niners this weekend. They're not.
I am fascinated to
They
see how this game goes.
They have to improve that because the Niners are always good enough to put up a win against just about everybody, unless they're banged up. And they're not. They're not that banged up.
The Niners aren't?
Well, they're a little bit. But
they're a little bit banged up. I'm interested to see if there's any give-up factor in this Niners team this weekend. Because with all the injuries and all the crap they've had to endure and dumb losses because of special teams and Geno Smith running one in, like, I want to see if there's any let go of the rope factor, right? The Bears this last weekend, they gave everything in that game, and that doesn't surprise me. I'm not so sure that's what we're going to get from the Niners. I think there might be a contingent on that team that says, F this, we're done. We're quitting. This team is dead and we know it. We're on the road in Green Bay, and if the Packers go up 10-0 early, I'm interested to see if they just let go of the rope because I could see it.
Is that what you're hoping for?
Well, of course that's what I'm hoping for. I'm trying to talk myself into that. I'm like the Packers went up 7-0 over the Bears this last weekend, and the Bears fought tooth and nail and gave everything and called everything in the playbook. I'm interested to see if the Niners will do the same. I'm skeptical, and I'm hoping that they won't because I kind of want the Packers to whoop them.
You can't find a team more up against the wall than the Bears were this weekend. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I mean, you came into a team that's fighting for its life. And like Dallas has given up, right?
Yeah.
It's over. They've given up.
Yeah.
The Jets have given up.
The Jags gave up.
So the Jags have given up, yes. You know, this Detroit team, Grant, I'll tell you, they're going to have to come down quite a few notches before any one of these teams is going to have a chance. I mean, they're going to have a bad game.
Yeah.
If they have an average game, they're going to win. I'm just trying to be realistic.
No.
If they have an average game.
Yeah. Go ahead. Finish.
They're going to have a bad game, and I'm not saying that can't happen, but I'm just saying that let's just put Green Bay and Detroit in there in the NFC Championship game. I'm going to say that Green Bay is going to have their best game of the season, and Detroit's going to have to step back. Apples to apples. There's just too many horses there. They got everything.
I'm not so sure the difference is as stark as you're saying, Eric. That's a good call. I appreciate it. But of course, right? The Lions would be favored in a potential playoff game. The Packers would have to play really great, and the Lions would probably have to stub their toe a time or two. Luckily, they're quarterbacked by Jared Goff, who's playing excellent football, and I take nothing away from him, but I've seen him stub his toe before. He threw 5 interceptions 2 weeks ago. So, I'm not saying, hey, the Packers are really the best team. That's not what I'm saying. But so many sports talkers have led you to believe that the Texans and the Packers are just cooked. Call the NFC for the Lions, call the AFC for either the Chiefs or the Bills. It's done. And I just think that's such a misrepresentation of the way the sport works in single elimination, 60-minute playoff games. Enough from me, enough respectfully from you. Mike Clemens will join us to talk Packers coming up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
First off, just want to say thanks to Preston Smith. 2019, that was we signed 4 guys, and you never really know how that was going to shake out. And for him to be, here still 5.5 years later and produce like he's produced, and he's done a lot of good things for us. I'm really appreciative. Played a lot of good football for us, and won a lot of games, and I wish him nothing but the best moving forward.
As Brian Gutekunst describing the Preston Smith trade, right? Why it came to be and thanking him for his time. Kind of gets us back into our Packers conversation because Preston Smith departed a pass rush room, defensive line room that's underwhelmed this year, and I think really underwhelmed in Chicago. Caleb Williams has been getting smoked, and they were without Nate Davis, who they'd cut. One of their tackles was missing from Sunday's game, and that defensive front was mostly a no-show. Although Brenton Cox had a nice moment, a player who stands to benefit a little bit from taking some of the snaps that Preston Smith leaves behind. So that's where we begin. Mike Clemens is here. He's brought to us by the Bay Motel in Green Bay. It's quiet and cozy, comfortable. The Bay Family Restaurant is right there as well. So if you're there, the hustle and the bustle of a Packers game day, and you're like, man, we can't wait for 2 hours at some bar around that we just need to get some grub to start our day. Perfect. They got you covered. You can go online, baymotelgreenbay.com for all the information that you need to make reservations or any questions that you have. Mike, let's start with that. Let's start with the pass rush, because I get the Bears looked great. They looked motivated. That wasn't a surprise to me. I thought the Packers offense, by and large, looked fine, minus some struggles in the red zone and a bonehead bad throw by Jordan Love. That pass rush should have been able to do more, in my opinion, I think, and they weren't. That was one of the more disappointing parts of that game for me on Sunday.
Yeah, remember the Packers pass rush had 8 or 9 sacks against the Titans. Well, that's because there was blood in the water. They had a lead,
sure,
and then they were able to just sack repeatedly. I think that was the game earlier in the season. But no, it's been missing through much of the season, and now you trade away Preston Smith. Like, why would you not hang on to that veteran? And why are you decreasing his snaps leading up to the time that he got traded? And, Preston made it clear when he got to Pittsburgh, like, look, I'm a stand-up outside linebacker, and they wanted me to put my hand in the dirt and figure out a completely different way on how to operate. And, quite frankly, I probably got the feeling that I wouldn't be there after this season anyway, the way the Packers just kind of, rechurn and turn over rosters and bring in younger guys.
He's probably surprised he was still there, given how old he is compared to the rest of the roster, honestly.
Except for the fact that as strong as they finished last year, as to just put away the Cowboys the way they did, and as Brian Gutekunst said at his end of season presser 8 or 9 months ago, we were 6 minutes away from that game in San Francisco and getting to the next level in the playoffs. It's full throttle. This is their Super Bowl team. With that receiver core that's in year 3, those 5 or 6 guys there. Same in the secondary. Same on some of the defense. All these draft picks that they've had the last 2 or 3 years that they've hit on and been very good. This was the second or third year of a window that's open, and Jordan Love leading the way. That we might make a run at this thing and get all the way in, and maybe have to go up against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, down in the Superdome in New Orleans next February.
Yeah.
But, your quarterback gets hurt. One reason that people are not calling for Matt LaFleur's head or Adam Stenavich, the offensive coordinator, is why? It's because they won 2 games without Jordan Love.
Yeah.
They brought in Malik Willis, and people like that's think of all of the accolades they got nationally for being able to pull that off and get 2 W's while Love was away with that knee injury. So, that kind of buys a coach equity. Now, fast forward to this game this past weekend, and now you got LaFleur. You played this on your shows in the last 24 hours yesterday afternoon, admitting, yeah, we kind of really screwed up on that 2nd and 5 down, deep in the red zone there.
Yeah.
They ran a cover 2. We ran plays that didn't give Jordan a whole lot of options with the leverages they had from their safeties, and so therefore you see Jordan, running around to the outside. The time that he, took the ball over the pylon, and then later their quarterback sneaking and all that. We can't have that. We have to have a better plan with the personnel we've got. Josh Jacobs is spot on. He looks rested. He looks great. And, between our tight ends and Tucker Kraft or a Christian Watson or Romeo Dobbs, somehow we got to figure out a way to get the football in consistently in 4-down territory, as LaFleur would call it. So he's raising his hand and also saying, during the game, I'm calling upstairs to say, what do the analytics say? Well, okay, here's what I'm thinking about playing. What's the difference there? It's only a difference of 2%. All right, I'm going with my gut. I'm going to run the plays that I want to.
It felt like, and a lot of Packers fans have called the show or tweeted, it's like, well, you got to take the points. And they would kick the field goal. It probably also would have been fine. I'm just so hesitant to hear that from people because we know how it ended, right? And I think it's human nature to use hindsight to analyze a decision. I felt like that go versus kick decision was 50-50. Like, if you kick it, you got to get the ball back anyways. If you go for it and don't get it, you got to get the ball back and score again anyways. That really felt like a 50-50 decision to me. So a coach used his gut and it didn't work. I don't know. A lot of people were ticked about that. I thought it was fine.
And from where LaFleur was standing, either by a couple of challenges he was upset about, a couple of bad calls, and also just like, why does this game? The game is flying by, and we've only had a couple of drives. We've only had the ball a couple of times.
Yeah, I'm sure that was part of it going forward. It's like, well, I don't know that we'll get the ball back because the Bears have strung together these long drives and have executed on 3rd and 4th down. It didn't work. Okay, but I can totally see his work. Like, if it was a math problem, I see how he arrived at that answer.
There weren't picks. There weren't fumbles. There weren't those. There were some penalties that dragged things on. But you look up at the clock. You're in halftime, and all of a sudden it's like, God, we only haven't touched the ball 3 times.
Yeah.
And that's why this wears on you. That's why LaFleur said after watching the tape, it's like, that's a strange game. That's the way it felt to him on the sidelines in terms of how many more possessions are we going to get? Maybe we better take a shot now. And fortunately, they did because but no one counted on Caleb settling down and having one of his best drives, and he should have been able to complete that kick. But here Bisaccia finally earned his paycheck and actually had a plan that they executed in being able to block the field goal. But at the end of the day, it's like, hey, come on, the way this Bears team was coming in and them changing it, offensive coordinator, less than a week before the game, the Packers should have beat these guys 35-17. I don't care how bad the Bears need it, and in front of their home crowd, how much they went in the winning streak at 10 against the Green Bay, and it's now 11, and franchise record between the two teams. Green Bay should have been lighting it up with the talent they've got, the injuries the Bears had on their offensive line, etc. And they didn't. And you know what? They came out a little flat, like I was a little concerned about coming out of a bye week, and just in terms of what that level is supposed to be. So then you get back over to the defensive side. Now, clearly, Xavier McKinney is a captain and a leader and a guy who's into the game and almost like having he's 24 going on 34. He's so driven to understand what the next opponent is and working early on it. And people come to him with questions. And Jeff Hafley, I said, I've seen him in practice. I can't quite tell from game tape or even being in the stadium. Is he talking like? Yeah, he's talking all the time. He's communicating. He's yelling. He's yelling at the sidelines. Don't substitute now. He's quarterbacking that defense. So you got that help.
Good.
He needs one other guy. And you guys have talked a lot about Quay Walker. That should be the guy. I'm here to tell you that Packers defensive coaching staff, and that's a whole new group. There's 5 or 6 new guys there. There's 5 or 6 guys that moved on along with Joe Barry last year. So it's a new group with a new defense in 4-3. So there's a lot of that changeover that's been going on all year. But they love Quay Walker as an athlete. They just do. And it's not just because he's a former first-round pick. They think the world of him. They think he takes hits. They think he's in there for 65 snaps. Whereas Preston Smith, what did they start doing? They had him cut down to about 35% of the game. And they want it. And, if they're getting any pressure from the GM and Brian Gutekunst, it's like, well, let's see more of this Brenton Cox Jr. guy. Let's see more of this Aaron Mosby.
Well,
let's rotate these guys in, these Enigbari type guys behind Rashawn Gary, and let's see if these guys can get to the quarterback a little bit quicker.
And they must love Quay Walker because it's not like they're tied to him. They weren't around when he was drafted. It's not like he was just drafted. This is his 3rd year. He's been around. There must be something they see in him and like in him to continue to play him this much, because no one would blame him if they're like, we're going to try other guys, like they might with Van Ness or others, because these aren't their guys. I know defensive coordinators don't draft players, but they weren't here when those players were selected. So they're just looking for the best players, whatever we can do to get the best result. And they still believe that it's Quay Walker. And I know that has a lot of Packers fans confused.
Well, there's something wrong on the edges. And, Lucas Van Ness not getting there and not talking about it either. It's kind of hard to get him. It was hard to get Preston Smith the last 3 or 4 weeks he was in Green Bay, quite frankly.
So you said,
we had one off the record casual conversation about his time in Washington, and one reporter who's now joined us in the Green Bay area was at Washington at the same time. She just said, now, when were you there till? When did you come? They were talking about when he got picked up from Green Bay in free agency and, their time together in Virginia and blah, blah. It was a nice casual conversation. And, 5 days later, he's traded. So in a way, I got to sort of say goodbye to Preston, because he looked at me and said, now, how long you been here? And I said, since, Lynn Dickey and James Lofton. I said, oh, yeah, you old school. You're an old head, man. We're teasing around. Have a good game. We'll see you next week.
That's high praise from a player. If they call you an old head, that means that's endearing as endearing gets.
And 36 hours after that game, he gets traded away, and he's more than happy about going to the Steelers, who are now atop the Ravens in their division. And who knows? Maybe he's got a better chance of getting deep into the postseason with the Steelers than he would have with Green Bay. And you go to Rashawn, and we had Rashawn Gary, first of all, is this really tough guy, and I put that in air quotes, because actually he is the sweetest, most charming. He can start crying at the drop of a hat. He's so passionate. So he puts on this tough guy, pro wrestler kind of image when you ask him questions like, what's wrong with the pass rush right now?
I don't know. You got to tell me if you're watching. We just rushing, doing what we got to do. The numbers going to come. Numbers, people get, misconstrued. Cut on the tape. See how we playing. See how we setting the edges. See how we putting pressure on quarterbacks, man. The numbers going to come if we keep playing our fashion of ball.
John, if you kind of like moving around a little bit more, they're kind of putting you above center on a couple of those rushes. How do you feel about sort of?
Oh, man, whatever I can get on one-on-one, please send me that way. It don't matter what it is. If it's on a guard, tackle, center, really don't matter, man. I love me against anyone.
I'm glad that he has that approach. I hope that he's right, that the results are coming, Mike. I hope that he's right.
Well, the reason he's still out there, even though I saw him, snap after snap in Chicago up against their left tackle, and it's like he was pushing this guy back into Caleb Williams, space, but he wasn't getting to Caleb Williams. He still, he couldn't throw this guy off of him, or he just wanted to, push him back into the backfield as a way to disrupt the backfield if there's a late developing thing, if it's an end round or whatever. He's there to contain first rather than let Caleb be play quarterback. Maybe he'll throw a pick, something. They ran Caleb 8 or 9 times, and they had all those quarterback keepers, and he got like 70 yards. I mean, him playing college quarterback and running with the football was a surprise in the game plan, no doubt. But the thing that these guys, why they still trust Rashawn, and they'll let him go a whole game before he finally gets a Caleb Williams sack, late in the fourth quarter, while Brenton Cox Jr. is, somehow back there early in the game, is just because of the guy's dedication. And his first outside linebacker coach, Mike Smith, who later followed Mike Pettin up to the Vikings, he would talk to us regularly about, Rashawn Gary is just, first of all, he was excited that they were going to draft him. He'd followed him at Michigan. He couldn't believe the constant energy, how the guy re-sculpted his body from like a defensive lineman to a stand-up outside linebacker. I mean, he's constantly working, and he constantly worked to come back from that ACL, maybe 4 or 5 months than anybody would have thought. But he's this highly emotional, passionate guy, not a crazy guy, not an angry guy. Just it's so meaningful to him. And then you ask him a question, and he lets his guard down. And when you say, "How much are you going to miss the veteran Preston Smith?"
Preston know what he means to me. Coming in, watching him, like I remember I told him coming in, like I used to watch your highlights, me preparing for my high school game. I remember watching that 91 rush from Mississippi State, and coming in here, man, and him, being a big brother, basically open book, man. I'm telling you, it's been times I was calling him 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. He got a wife and kids, but he answering the phone call to me because I'm up on the iPad just trying to get this, understand the set more, understanding what type of move I can see, just, being that big brother for me. Even throughout the season, man, things don't go your way, man. You got to keep even kill. He always says it's not as bad as it look, and it's not as good as you think. So just going back to tape, watching that mindset, having a guy that was able to pour into me, give me things that I could give to JJ Lucas, whoever comes in, it's great. But I can keep on going on and on and on and on about P and what he meant to me. But, he was a great part of my development.
So hopefully Rashawn Gary gets to be that guy to maybe Lucas Van Ness, or Enigbari's not as young, Brenton Cox Jr., right? Some of these other young players. But that pass rush group, Mike, we got about 60 seconds. That front four just hasn't been good enough, and that's going to need to improve if the Packers are going to reach their big-time goal this year.
And I don't know if that's just the way that they use these guys. Remember that Xavier McKinney corner or safety blitz, off the right tackle from a couple of weeks ago? Thing of beauty, where he got home early and made beautiful stuff. Maybe they still have those kinds of stunts that they want to use for December or playoff football and use Rashawn Gary. But I just know this in terms of, as the player, there was one guy who was part of the Green Bay Packers staff about 8 or 9 years ago that was in New Jersey to look at a quarterback and a tight end and a really good football program. They had to bring these players indoors because it was raining outside. So these football players are running out, and there's some kid that weighed over 300 pounds and could dunk the basket. Look like Giannis making these moves. And this guy wrote this down and said, "We got to take a look at this guy." The guy who wrote that down, his name was Matt LaFleur. He saw him in high school and said, "Oh my God."
Well, he goes on to be, basically the top recruit in his class, or one of the best players in the country that year. And
it's when he was with Tennessee. And so, that it's just, when you see these connections, that's why you keep on seeing these guys getting second or third chances, or why they put all their chips on this. Now, why they can't get, higher profile plays and highlights out of this guys, remains to be seen. But some of these things have to happen if they really think they're going to get past the Detroit Lions, the Minnesota Vikings. The Eagles are hot now. They're playing good football. You might have a wild card game against the Commanders. And I'm not seeing it right now. And they better start finding it starting Sunday against the 49ers.
You got a couple games at home and a lot of runway left, so I'm excited, but you're right. We're almost to Thanksgiving. Some of these things got to start to resolve or get better. Mike, appreciate you. Got to run. We'll talk Thursday.
Thanks, Grant. We'll talk to you then.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. 3-minute break. We'll wrap up the show next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. We're wrapping things up. Thanks to Mike Clemens. If you missed that conversation, you can catch it in the podcast, which will go up momentarily after 6 o'clock. Tomorrow, we'll continue a lot of these discussions, maybe give you a buck thought or two tonight. Oh, well, a lot of other good conversations. Appreciate you watching and listening. I'll be back tomorrow with 4. Talk to you then.